In this video, I'm going to show you how to DIY a wall paneling and get a professional result. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the old base trim. A little trick or tip that we always like to use is cutting the caulking back with a utility knife. That way when you're prying the trim off, you don't tear any of the drywall paper off with the caulking. And that way you're not having to go back and patch in any drywall. Now I want to figure out my layout of the framing behind the drywall. That way when I'm doing my horizontal 1x, then I can hit framing layout, and that way the board is going to be properly secured to the wall. I am using a stud finder to find the framing, but if you don't have one, an easy way to locate any kind of framing is find an outlet, and typically an outlet is nailed off to a framing member, so you can check left or right of the outlet and there should be a 2x behind that. Now that I have my framing marked out on the wall, I'm going to cut a board for the left and the right vertically, and then I'm going to picture frame the wall in. So I'll do my left, my right, and then the top and the bottom, and then from there I can figure out my layout for the actual paneling. A key part in cutting every board is to make sure that they fit properly. If they're too large, you don't want to force them in, because that will end up cracking drywall, or it will make your gapping on another board a little bit off. So just take your time, and if you need to, bring it out and cut it down a little bit further. I have my wall picture framed, and now I'm finding out the overall height from my bottom board to my top board. With that measurement, I can do a little bit of math and figure out how much length will be in between each horizontal board, and I'll show you my calculation and kind of walk you through how I do that. So to keep the math relatively easy, I'm going to go with a 1x4 material, which is actually measured 3.5 inches, and I'm going to plan for 4 rectangles. That will mean, including my top and bottom, I will have 5 horizontal boards. So 3.5 times 5 will give me 17.5. And then just to make up a number, I'm going to take 100 inches for my overall height. Take 100 minus the 17.5, and that will leave me with 82.5. Now with the 82.5, you want to divide that by the 4 rectangles that you'll have. And 82.5 divided by 4 will give me 20 5/8. Now your wall will be different, but hopefully that math will help you. Now I'm plumbing up my layout from the left to right before I put my horizontal boards in. That way it'll just help move things along when I am filling in the verticals, and I will already have everything plumbed and lined up rather than having to measure each one out and try and get them perfectly lined up and plumbed with each other. Now I'm cutting my 1x and putting it on my layout, and they should fit relatively tight. Like mentioned before, it'll just help in the end. That way you don't have to put any wood filler or anything like that if you do have a gap. And again, don't make them too tight where you really have to pound them in there. And with my layout that I already marked by finding the wall framing behind, now I can nail these horizontal boards in, and I know that I'm hitting the 2x and the boards will not drop or fall out. After all the horizontal board is completed, now I'm moving on to the vertical board, which can take a little bit more time just because rather than one run end to end, you have many little in-between boards to fill in. And I know before I did a level and made a mark with a pencil, but I have a laser out and utilize that as well. Another thing worth mentioning is you don't have to glue these boards up, but I figured that because I didn't want them to fall off or move or anything like that with the changing of the temperature and seasons and all that. I wanted to glue everything and use a panel adhesive on the back. That way everything is glued and the nails are just more temporarily going to hold. A very important thing to do before you get to the painting portion is to caulk any kind of gap. No matter what you do in your install, you're always going to have like a little gap. The drywall is never perfectly flat, especially when they have a tape joint. The tape joints always have a little bit of bow. So to make it look like a professional finish, you're going to want to caulk every rectangle. Now I have all the 1x complete, and as you can tell, they're perfectly even, left and right, and because the room isn't perfectly square, I ended up with rectangles, but I think the rectangles look a little bit better than if they are perfectly square. And now that we're done with that, now you can move on to everything for finishing. And to really get that cabinet look finish, every board is going to have a tiny little lip, whether the horizontal is a little bit proud or maybe the vertical is a little bit proud. But what you're going to want to do is take an orbital sander and knock the lippage off. That way they're perfectly flat and they flow together really well. And make sure when you are knocking that lip off that you come out onto the board, maybe a third or up to half of it. That way you don't get like a little ramp if you only try and knock that lip off, and then it will blend out a lot better and look like a flatter finish. After you're done sanding and your caulking is dry, and one thing, make sure whatever caulking you buy is paintable. If you buy the wrong kind of caulking, some of them are 100% silicone and you aren't able to paint that. So make sure you buy a paint grade caulking. Now I'm ready to paint. I pretty much brush every tight area, the bottom, the top, and the left and right, because I didn't want to get any paint on the carpet or the wall left and right or on the lid. And then each rectangle, I hand brushed the joint because a roller wouldn't get in there. And then after I did all the perimetering, then I was able to use a fine finish like cabinet roller on the larger areas. I ran out of battery before I was able to complete the painting, but I think everybody here, if you're taking on a project like this, I think painting should be pretty straightforward. Pretty much just roll everything out and you're done. Now that the painting is all dry, you're able to put the room back together and enjoy your end product.